My name is Dr. Joe Lockavitch. I'm the author and the developer of Failure-Free Reading. Before I begin, however, what I'd like to do is to share with you just a little bit of my background, my experience, how Failure-Free got started, and then more importantly, the rationale as to how the materials work and how they're put together. I'm a former classroom teacher, university professor, school psychologist, but first and foremost, I'm an applied researcher. For the past 20 years, I've been actively engaged in one particular research question, and that is, all things being equal, what do we do with the individual who, whether they're 6, 16, or 66, can't read, as one teacher said, can't read a lick? What do we do with the non-readers? Now, speaking of that, what I want to talk about quickly is a very important distinction between poor readers, struggling readers, and non-readers. There is a huge difference between the three terms. Poor readers, by definition, are those kids who are half a grade to a grade level behind. Struggling readers are those kids who are up to 3 grade levels behind. And non-readers are those students, regardless of age, who are sitting in American classrooms with a total reading vocabulary of 50 words or less. My research indicates that there are approximately 440,000 students currently at this moment in time sitting in the classroom with that reading ability. That is Failure-Free Reading's primary target. Those are the kids that I'm asking you to go after. Those are the kids that you're going to reach through the use of Failure-Free Reading methodology. Now, what I want to do right now is share with you my research. I won't take long, and I'm just going to give you a very, very brief overview. So let's start. What I found primarily was that when it comes to the classification of non-readers, there are really 3 characteristics that you're going to see. For lack of better terms, I've said that these kids are PD, ED, and LD. PD, ED, and LD. Now, before I get to what PD stands for, let me just take a moment and tell you a little bit about reading research. Reading is the most researched topic in all of education. And yet, if we were to take the nation's 12 leading reading experts, put them in a room, and ask them to agree on the definition of reading and how it should be taught, they'd never come out of the room. There is a broad difference of opinion. That said, I want you to understand what Failure-Free Reading's definition of reading is, and that is gaining meaning from the printed page. When you work with your students, if they are not reading fluently, if they are not comprehending what is in front of them, if they are not demonstrating to you that they have a knowledge of what it is you're asking them to read, then no reading is taking place. So, definition of reading, gaining meaning from the printed page. The second thing I have to tell you before I get to those characteristics is reading's one universal reading research fact. Again, reading is the most researched topic in all of education. Literally thousands of articles are published yearly. But if I could come up with one summary reading research fact, it would be this. All reading programs work, but they don't work for all students. There is no published study ever in the teaching of reading to show one program 100% effective with all students in all situations. That said, what we're trying to say is that we have to find what works best for all students and use a variety of different methods. Failure-free is an exciting approach for non-readers and even struggling readers, and our success rate is 85% or higher. But we're not perfect, and there is still room for improvement. Now, PD, remember what I said, all programs work, they don't work for all students. PD is the most controversial part of my program. PD stands for the phrase, phonetically deaf. That's right. You know what I'm talking about. There are some students out there that if you dedicated the next 125 waking years of your professional life, they wouldn't hear and They were born, for whatever reason, with the tin ear for sounds. They are not going to learn phonetically. They are not going to learn through a sound symbol relationship. And these are the kids that are coming into your program right now. They're there primarily because they failed through that type of approach. Failure free is based on a compensatory model. What that means is we're not going to try to remediate their deficit. What we're going to allow them to do is to bring their strengths to the table and show you what they can do when they're given that opportunity. So failure free is a non-phonic, highly structured visual approach for students who are PD or phonetically deaf. Now ED stands for the phrase environmentally denied. And what we're saying is this: kids cannot read for meaning material that they cannot relate to. There are really just two groups in the United States today in the classroom: the haves, and you guessed it, the have-nots. Sadly, most of the students that you're going to deal with are have-not kids. They're kids that are economically deprived, and they're not coming to school with the necessary backgrounds and experiences to relate to the material that is generally put in front of them. Failure-free controls for this. We control for it through the use of our methodology. The point that you have to remember is reading is relating. Look at their eyes. If they don't seem to understand it, then ask, how can I get this idea across to them in a way that they can understand? The third characteristic of these students, and it's the key to my program, is LD. Now, LD does not mean learning disabled. LD stands for the phrase language deprived. And what I'm basically saying is this: we're spending too much time treating symptom and not enough time treating disease. Poor reading is a symptom. Language development is the disease. The reason why your kids are not comprehending at grade level is because their internal language is not at grade level. Kids can't read for meaning above their language level of comprehension. An 8th grade student will never comprehend 8th grade material if they're coming in there with the 2nd and 3rd grade internal vocabulary. So that's what failure-free does. Failure-free is a highly structured language development program designed to give the students the skills that they're going to need in order to comprehend. So from this moment on, I need you to understand that you are a language teacher first, a reading teacher second, and a content teacher third, and you can't change the order. From this moment on, everything that you do with your kids or your student is designed to expand their receptive vocabulary, and you'll see that through the use of the failure-free methodology. Now, they're PD, they're ED, and they're LD. Phonetically deaf, environmentally denied, language deprived. That's the bad news. I also found that the problem that they're having is not with them or with their teachers or with the school or with the parent. A lot of it comes from the inappropriateness of the instructional material that we're asking them to read. And so what I found in my research is that our kids need simultaneous access to 3 sources of information within the instructional material itself. And what are those 3 key ingredients? Well, the first is repetition. The second is sentence structure. And the third is story content. And let me briefly go over each one. Repetition. For our kids to be successful, they need exposure. Not a little bit, not somewhat. They need a tremendous amount of exposure. And that's the beauty of failure-free. But it's a multi-sensory approach in which they hear multiple times, multiple exposures, what they're going to have in order to be successful with the material that you put in front of them. Research is clear. The lower the literacy rate of the kids, the greater the number of times they have to see words. And our kids may need to see it 75 to 100 to 200 or even 300 times. Fortunately, you don't have to say it 75 to 100 to 200 times. The material, the methodology, the approach will do that. Sentence structure is the most overlooked area in all of the teaching of reading. Many of our kids are coming from homes in which standard English is not the spoken language. They don't have an intuitive understanding of the rules of grammar. They don't fully understand grammar, and therefore they don't understand how certain sentences are written. It's not that they don't understand the deep meaning, they don't understand the way in which the sentence is formulated. And finally, story content. Kids, as I said, cannot read what they can't relate to. Multiple meaning words, idiomatic expressions, figurative speech, both for our special ed kids, for our limited English kids, for our at-risk kids. Very, very difficult to do. Failure-free materials control for that in the early stages, and then when you get into the verbal master, we're going to start to expand their base. We're going to expand their language base at a very, very rapid rate. So, failure-free as a methodology is designed for your non-readers, your lowest literacy kids. You, as an instructor, have to be language first, reading second, content third. Every fiber of your being has to be in the development of their receptive language skills. These kids can succeed. They can be successful. The methodology does work, provided you buy into it. If you do, then you're going to enter a world in which you're going to save lives and change our society. I thank you very much.